if you're a programmer looking to do some code, you're probably going to want to get some type of integrated development environment or IDE to change stuff around. You can edit text files manually and do that, which some people that haven't done a lot of coding try to do, but I think by the end of this video you'll figure out that using an IDE is quite a bit better. So to give an example of just using a normal text editor, we could go into the source code, and then maybe we'll just go in here and then say we'll say this file, we'll just say we make a change to here, and we'll just call this the AA concentric ellipse. So one way is to make changes like this. So we can just go to our build directory. Oops. Create a build, and then from here we can rebuild it, and we made changes to this and saved it. So after this is done, we should see our change that we just did right here. So let's start QtCreator up. Alright, start a new file, and I changed the name of the concentric ellipse to AA concentric ellipse. So if we do that, and then here you can kind of see the name changed, so we can tell that editing this code does update the build with what we're doing. So of course that's one way to work. I mean, one problem with this approach is how would have I even known to go to this file, the source plugins assistance, go into this CC file and find it. It's quite hard if you want to do anything more than just really maybe basic text, and really even basic text is pretty hard. So we are going to get a IDE called QtCreator to help us with a lot of this stuff. So we can get that by doing a sudo install sudo apt install QtCreator, and then we can get it. I installed it a little bit ago, but this doesn't take very long. It might take a minute or two to usually get. And then once we get it, we can run it by either doing QtCreator like this, or how I usually do it is use kind of the start menu and then just typing QtCreator and then launching it from this way. Now, okay, we have it loaded, so the first thing we need to do is kind of hook it up to our source code so it can figure everything out. So to do that, we can go to File, and then we go Open, File or Project. And I guess it probably would be easier, I could just do Open Project here. And then we can go to the QtCreator, go in the source code, and then use this as kind of the hook to grab everything. And then when you do open with this, QtCreator kind of reads it, it figures out all the files, all the code, and it'll usually take a minute or two to parse everything out and kind of build out all of these relationships between all the code files and classes with everything. So we'll just let this kind of finish setting up. Looks like it's pretty much done. So yeah, we can see all the files are in here. So if we were doing that example we did with a text file, more than likely you're not going to know where it's at in the code. So if you use the search area down here, number 2, we could just type that in like here. Like we know it's called concentric ellipse, and then we can just search for that, and then it kind of just looks across the entire source code and it finds all references to it. So we know that these are just some strings, but where it's actually returning the actual string that it displays is right here. So if we just double click it, it shows it right there, and then we could make the edit like that, and that would have given us the same results if we saved it. Yeah, this kind of just shows all your files you have open. I think this is kind of the same as this. This is sometimes a lot easier to move around, so I usually just use that. The other thing I like with this area is you can use this expand all, so it kind of collapses and expands. Sometimes when you do searches, it might have like 200 or 300 matches or more, and doing this sometimes kind of helps you figure out where you want to have it. So like for example, for that the concentric ellipse, I know this is really specific to the tool, so there was a good chance that this actually was going to have the text that I need to change in it, where I know things like if it's a saver or it's just a generic painting assistant, there's a good chance it's not actually setting the text there. Some of the other really cool things you can do with this thing are you can switch between the kind of the implementation. They're usually C++, but sometimes they're .cc. If you press F4, it'll switch between the header file and the kind of the implementation file, and that's usually useful because variables like this, or you have certain functions that you need to figure out what they need to do, it's easy to bump between them. So F4 is pretty good with that. You'll notice the color coding thing's pretty nice with everything. Another thing that's really cool with this is you can take a class that might be hard to understand, like say this class here, like it says it does draw assistant, and you might be like, oh, that's cool, what else does this class do? If you just kind of hover over it and then just do F2 on it, it'll take you right to that class, and then you kind of get all the same information with it. A lot of the documentation with the code and the classes with Krita are usually only in code a lot of the times, so it's really nice to be able to bounce around and start understanding what a lot of these classes are just by looking at the code base. You're not going to find a lot of this stuff on websites or things like that, so the code's really the best place a lot of this code is documented. Another really neat thing with an IDE that can be pretty helpful is the finding out how much something is being used. Like say if, for example, this function in here needs to be swapped out because say there's a better way we're doing it, and like we just need to replace all of the places that this exists. You can kind of right click on a function or a class or most of the stuff, and you get a bunch of different things. Like it has the other shortcuts we talked about. It does this find usages. So this will pretty much grab all of the places that this document to widget transform exists. So that's really nice for finding things sometimes. One last thing to go over. This thing does a lot of stuff, but just one more helpful thing that I think that makes using one of these IDEs really nice is once you use one of these pointer operator things, you can kind of get a list of all of the things that are available to it that you can use with it that are pretty nice. It tells you the return type, and then if it has different arguments that it needs to get passed into, it'll tell you what those are. So that's another really neat thing. This thing can do a lot of other stuff with debugging, and just there's a lot of other functions and things it can do, but there could probably be a whole nother video to go over some of that type of stuff. So usually when I use this tool, when I code, I actually don't build Krita with this. There are some options in the projects to set things up and do some of the coding stuff here, but to me it's easier to just use this as a code editor. And then when I'm building, I actually just go over to a command line and I just do a make install here when I'm done. I mean, usually when you set this up here, you can do it when you set it up and you hit play and it'll run, but it's easier for me to do it this way, and then I can run it this way. Another thing why I like to bounce between these two is usually if I have a bunch of code that I want to commit, it's easier for me to just bounce back to the source, and then I can look at my code. I guess I haven't updated any code, but say if I added a variable changes equals false or something, and then I can see what I've changed by doing a get status. I can see what I've changed, and then I can do all of my add and committing stuff, and I can push my stuff up to the source code repository and switch branches. And I think using a lot of Git stuff can be a lot easier sometimes in the command line. So that's why I like that. I still like to use the command line for doing some things, but I do think using this as the text editor to bounce around and doing the code stuff is a lot easier. So yeah, hopefully that kind of convinced you to try out QtCreator if you want to start playing around with the code. I think it'll definitely make your life a lot easier.